have by now we've done quite a bit of work in terms of understanding the influences, the external and the internal influences, the factors that would help us or that would potentially impact us in the negative direction. So we did all of those using the SWOT analysis, right? So the strengths, weaknesses, which are internal, and then opportunities and threats, which are external, and how we would be able to come up with strategies to help address those. And then we'd also look at the elicitation results. So these are the findings and the insights that we gathered from understanding the various stakeholder perspectives, from carrying out the interviews, the workshops, the prototyping, and all those other elicitation exercises. And then we had a start in terms of how the initial designs would look like. What are the high level architectures and the initial designs of to be able to come up with the proposed solution. So we also started those designs, we got them prioritized, we perhaps had a review of those with the initial stakeholders. We also had the requirements prioritized with the product owners, with the business owners, with the requirements owners. We've also got the business objectives and the goals, where we would be in the next 2 years, 1 year, and what is the potential value of the offering that we're working on, the product or the process, or it could be an initiative to be creating a huge change in the organization. What is it that we're trying to actually achieve? What is the potential value that we're going to deliver through these initiatives? So all of these are going to be the key inputs for us. And then we would address the risks. We would understand what is the risk involved, what are the kind of areas where we can try and see the potential problems that could arise, and what are the ways that we can try and understand the impact that each of these risks are going to have on the proposed solution that we're going to build. And also we're going to look at what is the probability of that particular risk occurring, and so we come up with different mitigation strategies to be able to address those risks, which is what we're going to do now. And then the tasks that we're going to potentially use going forward from this particular stage or activity, or manage the stakeholder collaboration. So essentially, again, once we have a good understanding of the risks, we'll then be able to update our stakeholders, the senior stakeholders, senior management, and perhaps even external stakeholders, the suppliers, and so on, the regulators, for example. We would then be able to relate to them. We'll then let them know what the risks are, how we can help work together to be able to address those risks. And then the defined change strategies, again, one of the other areas that would potentially take this as an input. So the defined change strategy, as we discussed, also addresses laying down a roadmap in terms of how we're going to achieve the proposed solution, or how we're going to really, what is the approach that we're going to adopt, what are the kind of methods we're going to implement, all of those, the techniques and tools that we're going to potentially use. All of those would be, again, using this particular set of tasks as the output. And then analyze potential value and recommend solution. That's, again, one of the other areas which would, again, get impacted with this one, because we are trying to address what is it that we're trying to deliver as part of this to-be solution. What kind of value we're going to bring forth to the organization, to the teams, to the departments, to the external stakeholders, to customers, users, suppliers. What is it that we're trying to bring forth? What kind of value is this offering, is this initiative trying to deliver to all of these? And then once we have got that idea, then it's all about how we'll achieve that, right? So once we have good clarity in terms of what we're going to achieve, we'll then start looking at how we can assess the progress, how we can understand the performance and the progress of what we're doing. And that can be done through these, having the measures and the metrics in place. And once we have those in place, obviously the importance is to understand the limitations or the constraints of the solution. What are the boundaries within which we're working on? What are the kind of challenges that we need to address? Is the technology constraint? There could be some business constraints. There could be something to do with the regulatory requirements, the business rules. All of these actually help us to kind of structure where within what limitations we should try and operate. And again, that would again lead to the understanding of the overall business of the organization as a whole in terms of the constraints that we have. So it could be infrastructure, operational constraints, technology constraints, or for example, it could be the resources or the people constraints as well. Sometimes we may not have enough people or the right skilled people to be able to work on these initiatives. So that could be again another constraint within which we need to work. So all of these, understanding these different set of areas and how the risk assessment would actually help address each of these areas is a critical task for us. So what do we mean by, for example, the risk assessment? What are the things that we would have support of in achieving this? So obviously we would need to take the business analysis approach into consideration, which means which methodology we're going to use, what kind of techniques we're going to using, what tools we're going to deploy. All of these again come into consideration. Are we following the waterfall approach? Are we going the Scrum or Agile approach? And if it's an Agile approach, how are we going to time box these? What is the kind of time box, and what kind of business analysis requirement elicitation exercise are we going to deploy? All of those, what kind of documentation we're going to involve. Is it going to be user stories, or is it going to be really detailed requirement specifications like the functional requirement specification documents, or so on and so forth? So we will have to get all of these in a clear, explicit understanding of these. And then business policies, what are the kind of policies as an organization we have with respect to the approaches, the organizational structure, the recruitment, HR, training, development, and infrastructure, operations, all of these, everything. Is not just one area. So what kind of policies, procedures, and rules that would affect this particular initiative that we're working on? And obviously the change strategy is very important, because that is actually giving us a sense of direction, and it would actually identify how we're going to approach these objectives, how we're going to achieve these goals, in what way, in what are the kind of steps we're going to take. For example, if it is to do with increasing the customer satisfaction as a goal by, let's say, 70% from 63% to 70% next year. So that's the business objective and the key performance indicator. And the target for you is, let's say, 70% customer satisfaction. So there's a jump of about 7%. The strategy would actually define how you get there, how you can actually achieve, what is a game plan for you to be able to achieve that 7% increase in the customer satisfaction, which means that you need to have some approaches in place. You need to ensure that you have the right people who would take this forward. You need to come up with strategies and approaches for implementing this on the ground, how your customers are going to see you, what is the visibility, your brand identity, your promotions, advertisements, and your reach to the market or to the larger geographies. All of these are different approaches. And then once you have those in place, how you're going to address the change, how you're going to address the customer satisfaction. Do you want to deploy some kind of a customer satisfaction survey? And how are you going to execute that survey? How are you going to carry on with the survey? What are the findings? How are you going to get it back? So once you have that in place, is it a true reflection of the sentiments that you have in the market? So how are you going to select the right audience or the right target market for your survey that you're going to carry on? So all of these is the strategy. This defines you. This gives you the tool set, the approach, the methodology, as well as the proper game plan for you to be able to execute that strategy on the ground, so that you can achieve that, the business objectives. And then the current state description, obviously this would come a little earlier than the strategy, because unless you understand the current state, the as is situation, what is the current set of things, how are customers perceiving us at the moment, what is their image according to the customer. It's about the images, and what is their understanding, how are they perceiving us as the brand, and how are they perceiving us as an organization. That understanding would actually help us get a proper foundation on which we can stand and say, okay, now given this understanding, given this image of the customers of us, We would like to now take it to the next level, or we would like to actually flip the whole pyramid. We'll have a completely different perception that needs to be created. So again, all of that is going to be done with the future state description. So the to be is basically what you would like to achieve in the next few months or years, whereas the current state description, the as is giving you a sort of a baseline, a kind of a foundation, a pedestal on which you can stand and deliver. And then identified risks, obviously, all as we mentioned across the different knowledge areas, the risk identification is pretty much like a continuous process. You don't stop, you don't start at somewhere and then you just stop there. You need to continuously evaluate the risks that are associated with all the activities that you're doing, whether it is project management, business analysis, development, design, architecture, whatever activity we are doing. We should try and understand what are the potential risks, identify those, categorize them, and then be able to come up with the mitigation strategies for those risks, and then address them, log them into the risk register, and then follow it up with the right strategy so that we address those risks and take the preventive and corrective actions. And then the stakeholder engagement approach is again following what we had discussed, how you would like to engage with the stakeholders, how would you like to communicate with them, the senior stakeholders, interviews, if it's middle management workshops, if it's about lower management or people who are actually doing the work, the operational people, trying to engage them with prototyping, observation, and so on and so forth. So all of those different engagements and the communication protocols you would like to have in place before you move on to the next level. So all of these are important indicators and important elements that you should have in place so that you can continue with the risk assessment, and then that would lead you to the actual identification of what are the potential risks. Again, just to give a bit of a background why we need this and what is the reason for us to have this risk assessment, it's important that we understand the undesirable. So potentially these are the kind of circumstances or consequences that could result from both internal and external forces. So that's what is important. Again, that's what we're talking about in the SWOT analysis, right? So we've got both strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, how we can try and understand them and how we can try and mitigate the negative impact that could potentially be delivered through those occurrences of those events. And risks could be really anything. It could be the current state, the desired future state, or potentially the way you're doing this work, the program itself. If you do not have enough resources to carry on the transformation project, then that's a risk. If you do not have the right technologies, the tools to execute the project, the initiative, or the change, that's again a risk in itself, right? So again, you're talking about risks from different angles. We talked about management risks, market risk, business risk, people risk, technology risk, infrastructure risk. So many different types of risk. Risk can be in different shapes, forms, and sizes. So it's all about how we can identify the risk in the right early enough so that we can take action. So that, and we are prepared enough to either, as we discussed, there could be three types of reaction or mitigation. One is you can avert the risk, so which means that you can try and just avoid that risk. And then the third one is basically you can try and accept. You can't do anything. You can neither avert nor avoid. You can just have got to accept the risk and then move on. So depending on the type of risk, the potential impact, and how you're going to structure the response, you can either you can do any one of those three different mitigation actions.